Well, the Kraken ended up going to a shootout, so you know what that means. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken lose 4-3 in the shootout in Arizona. And yeah, I think it's finally time that we start the petition to get rid of the shootout and bring back ties, which I say as a good North American sports fan who hates ties almost more than anything else. I mean, just imagine if, say, in the NBA, if things were still tied after overtime, which I understand is a little bit more rare, but if they then decided to decide the winner of the game via, I don't know, a game of horse, for example, or if in baseball, if things are still tied after the 10th inning, they went to a home run derby. Yeah, granted, it would be kind of fun to watch, but it's still a stupid way to decide a game. I will say that if they were to get rid of the shootout in the NHL, which isn't going to happen, so it's not really a problem, but I would then hope that they would add another, say, 5 minutes to the 3-on-3 overtime for a total of 10, just to further reduce the number of games that then would end in a tie. I mean, at least at that point, you're actually playing something that resembles hockey to decide the winner of the game, even if it's with less players on the ice, rather than just a skills competition to decide who gets that last point, which, yeah, I mean, granted, with hockey, because of the loser point in overtime, it's not as big of a deal as just a win-loss like with the other sports, but it's still a dumb way to decide who gets that extra point. And I understand that it's probably going to sound like sour grapes coming from a Kraken fan, granted that the Kraken have basically no chance of ever winning a shootout with how things are going right now, or honestly, not even just right now, as they've now lost 6 straight games that have gone to the shootout, going all the way back to their last win in the shootout being April 16th of 2022, towards the end of the inaugural season for the Kraken. Weirdly, inaugural season where they were 3-1 in the shootout, and again are now 0-6 since then. But even with that being said, I'm still far from alone in this opinion about the shootout. There are fans all across the league, even of teams who actually do occasionally win in the shootout, that hold the same opinion about it. Not that it really matters, because again, in the end, especially while Bettman is commissioner of the league, nothing's going to change here. The league doesn't really care what fans think, so yeah, we're stuck with it one way or another. And for Kraken fans, that means a lot more dropped points in the standings. Or at least a couple a season anyway. Anyway, all that aside, the part of this game that was actually hockey went decently well for the Kraken, which is also part of the reason that it's a little bit more annoying even that they didn't end up coming away with 2 points. And actually, before we even jump into the game, there's a couple of cool stories coming into it. One that I didn't get a chance to get to after the Flames game because there were some other things that need to be said, and well, it escaped my mind, but Yanni Gourde, now for the 2nd game in a row, was wearing a net guard. He joins a handful of players in the NHL that have started at least trying them to see if they'll work for them long term, after obviously the unfortunate passing of Adam Johnson. And then with this game specifically, the big story coming into it, at least from a Kraken perspective, but honestly I would say from both sides, was that Joey Daccord was going to get the start in net for the Kraken. He did get to play a little bit of the end of the game when the Kraken came to Arizona last year, but he was going to get the start and play the entire way in this one in Arizona, which is a big deal because that building that they played in was built in no small part because of Joey Daccord, as he was a big part of the first few years of the Arizona State hockey team after they joined the NCAA as a D1 team officially, starting in net for them the final 2 of the 3 years he was there, and in that last year, his performance in net was a big part of the reason that they really started to gain some momentum in the area, get some attention, and draw the funding that eventually helped them build this arena that was then there so that the Coyotes would have a place to play when they got kicked out of their other arena for not paying rent. Now, as we get into the game, as it would turn out, I think Daccord probably would have liked to have a little bit better of a night considering the homecoming for him. He wasn't necessarily bad, but we've seen him play better already a few times this season. The good news, though, is that he does end up making his first save a few seconds into the game, and then right back the other way off a turnover in the neutral zone and some careless play defensively, positioning-wise by the Coyotes. Alexiak's able to find Gourde wide open for a 2-on-0 breakaway along with Tolvanen. They skate up to the net on either side of the slot, pass it back and forth a few times, and eventually it's Tolvanen that puts it into the net. No chance whatsoever for Ingram in net for Arizona, and the Kraken have the early, less than a minute in, 1-0 lead. Now, I will admit that as they were skating up and passing that puck back and forth a handful of times, I was a little bit worried that they were going to overpass their way out of actually scoring here, but they managed to get it into the back of the net after a nice few one-touch passes back and forth across the slot. And well, I guess maybe that's what it would take for the team to actually score on the shootout, is have 2 guys go at once. Unfortunately for the Kraken, that's probably even less likely to end up being allowed by the NHL than getting rid of the shootout entirely, so we're going to have to stick with watching them continue to fail to score whatsoever. Regardless of that though, the Kraken do try to actually build off of this lead with the next few shots on goal, but eventually Arizona evens things up a few minutes later when Michelli just skates into the offensive end with 3 Kraken players around him, none of which really seem all that interested in going up to challenge him, so he's able to get up towards the top of the face-off circles, still in the slot, fires off a shot, and it does glance a bit off the inside of one of Larsson's skates right in front of him, and that's enough to throw Daccord off. It finds its way off the post and into the net to tie things up on a seemingly harmless play. Again with this one though, while I think it is one Daccord would probably like to have back, it still seems like with the rest of the Coyotes going off for a change and just Michelli skating into the offensive end with 3 Kraken players between him and the net, that at least one of them could have gone and challenged him up by the blue line and prevented him from just freely skating up into that high slot area to take that shot. Eventually Larsson does kind of get up in his face, but that's right as he takes the shot. And eventually it turns out that Larsson just screens Daccord and has the puck go off of him. Unfortunately, both of those things likely contributed to this puck ending up in the net. At least from there though, the Kraken are able to compose themselves and really take over this game through the middle part of the first period, and it isn't until the last handful of minutes of the first that Arizona finally starts to get things going back their way, eventually ending up with a power play in the late stages of the first, which the Kraken kill off thanks to a couple of big saves by Daccord, but they are able to kill it off, and we get to the end of 1 with the score still tied at 1. We do end up starting the second period though at 4-on-4 because as the first period was coming to an end, in the Kraken end of the ice where the puck happened to be at the time, Keller and Gord, who were kind of at each other all game long, get tangled up a little bit, just kind of bumping each other. Keller grabs a hold of Gord's stick and then flops over on the ice trying to sell a trip or something. I don't really know what he was going for there. In the end, they do put Gord in the box for tripping and Keller for embellishment, so they recognize that he flopped, but still give Gord the equalizing penalty for some reason. Either way, it leads to that 4-on-4 for the first 2 minutes, which doesn't lead anywhere goal-wise, but not long after, the Kraken do end up once again on the penalty kill, with Arizona getting their second power play of the game early on in the second. And unfortunately, this time they do end up scoring on it off of kind of midway through the power play. It's just a nice passing play, a designed play set up here by the Coyotes, as would become clear later on in the game. It starts up by the blue line. I think it's Dursey that passes it down to Keller. Keller quickly into the slot for Schmaltz, who fakes a one-timer, but he was planning to pass it back the entire time. Back to Keller. Keller with the one-timer. It's tipped in front by Hayton and into the net to give the Coyotes the 2-1 lead on the power play. For the Kraken, it's just continued struggles on the penalty kill all of a sudden. For whatever reason, the Kraken just can't seem to get both special teams working at the same time, because the penalty kill that was fantastic through the back half of last season and into the early part of this year has all of a sudden fallen apart right when the power play has seemed to get things going out of nowhere. Who knows, maybe someday both units will play up to their potential for an extended period of time, and the Kraken will be able to actually have an advantage when it comes to special teams. But we'll just keep waiting for that to happen. At least for the Kraken though, for the second time this game after an Arizona goal, they're able to come back with a quick response back the other way, and this time they even score on it, as Beniers with a nice play through the neutral zone to get into the offensive end and then through a couple of Coyotes players, dropping it eventually for Eberle in the corner by the blue line. Eberle back down to Beniers deep in the offensive end, then Beniers finds a wide open Justin Schultz coming across in the high slot. Schultz handles it once, then fires off the shot, and this is maybe one Ingram would like to have back, but it goes off of the top of his pad and into the net to tie the game right back up at 2. And then off of this goal, the Kraken start to build some momentum, looking for more, eventually getting a power play, which they do get set up a couple of times, get some shots off, but aren't able to score. And not long after, the Coyotes bring that momentum to an end with another power play of their own, which they're not able to score on either, and by the end of 2, we're still tied at 2. Then as we start the third period, early on, the Kraken are going to get their second chance on the power play of the game, and like I said, while the penalty kill has started struggling, the power play at the same time has gotten hot, and they show it here as they immediately get set up in the offensive end, get a few chances off, and eventually it's Matty Beniers firing off a shot towards the net, but at the outstretched blade of Justin Schultz. It goes off of that blade and off of the post out of the net, but right back to Schultz behind the back of Ingram, and then Schultz puts it into the net on the other side to give the Kraken the 3-2 lead here early on in the third, as Once again, it's Schultz with that net front presence on the power play that seems to be the key for the Kraken. And for Beniers, who is still trying to find the back of the net for the first time himself this season, having all sorts of bad luck, and lately it does seem like it's starting to get in his head as he's been gripping the stick pretty tight and making some uncharacteristic mistakes. But either way, this one on the power play is his second assist of this game, so hopefully a couple of points in a game can start to get the ball rolling for him and get him back to playing more like the Beniers that we saw for the vast majority of last season. Either way, it's a good sign that he had a pretty decent game in this one. I mean, who knows if it's the new line that Hackstall put him with in this game, with McCann and Yamamoto on either side of him rather than Eberle and Bjorkstrand, but at the same time, the 2 assists he got were on the power play, and between shifts with Eberle picking up the secondary on the Schultz goal. Either way, I'm sure we'll probably see with the good game that Beniers had a little bit, or at least one more try of that McCann-Yamamoto line with Beniers at the center. Unfortunately though, for the Kraken, as we get back to the play in this game specifically, this lead for them lasts about as long as it's been since I talked about that goal that gave them the lead, because right after they score, they send the Coyotes to yet another power play. And once again, the Coyotes score on it off of the same exact passing play that they scored their other power play goal on. It's Durzi down to Keller, Keller to Schmaltz, Schmaltz back to Keller, Keller with the one-timer. This time there's no tip, it's Keller's goal, and the Coyotes tie things right up at 3. Of course, I do think that it's worth mentioning how the Coyotes got this power play in the first place, as right off the faceoff at center ice following the Kraken goal, the Coyotes, and Keller specifically, get the puck into the offensive end, and then Keller, for the second time this game, demonstrates his ability to impersonate a fish out of water, as Dunn gives him a little shove in the back, and he swan dives onto the ice, selling the cross-check. Dunn goes to the box, the Coyotes to the power play, and well, the rest is history that we already talked about. Now, once again, for the third time this game, the good news for the Kraken is that following another Coyotes goal, they're able to build a little bit of momentum themselves. It doesn't happen quite as immediately as it did with the first two, but they do kind of take over the majority of this third period, eventually getting another power play that they get chances on but don't score. And it isn't until the final minutes of this third that the Coyotes do get a couple of very good chances that Daccord has to make sprawling toe and leg saves. Eventually, the Kraken get another chance the other way that Ingram makes a very nice save in the final seconds, but we do head to the end of 3 with the score now tied at 3, which is, I guess, good for the symmetry of this game, as we were tied at 1 after 1, tied at 2 after 2, so of course we'll be tied at 3 after 3. In overtime, both teams get their chances, but neither scores, so we go to the shootout, and yeah, as I said in the beginning, when you go to the shootout as a fan of the Kraken, you know what's going to happen. I mean, sure, I did allow myself to believe just a little bit that maybe, just maybe this time would be different, but it wasn't, as Bjorkstrand, Beniers, and Eberle all fail to score, and the second Coyote does score. I can't remember who it was, but I don't really care to look it up. And once again, like I said in the beginning, that's now the 6th shootout loss in a row for this team, going all the way back to that game in the middle of April in the inaugural season. And not only are they losing in the shootout consistently, but I don't even remember the last time somebody scored in the shootout for the Kraken. It's gotten that bad with these shootouts. Fortunately, they've only had 4 each of their first 2 seasons. It's already 2 now early on this season, so hopefully they don't have to do too many more of these, because again, that's just 1 point in the standings. I guess at least as far as silver linings are concerned, the Kraken did really outplay the Coyotes from start to finish in this game, aside from, a couple of bursts here and there that the Coyotes got. But it is a good sign, given that the last couple of times the Kraken have lost games, it's been because they've not been able to build off of strong first periods. They have played pretty well throughout the first periods of games, really throughout this season so far, but the second and third periods have come back to bite and haunt them at this point in the season, with a lot of the losses, especially that last one against Calgary really stands out, as they had the good first period, but then didn't play offensively in the second and didn't play the third pretty much at all, and ended up losing that game as a result. So it was nice to see them come back and really have a full 60-minute effort against a team that's had a pretty decent start to the season this year. It's a bit annoying that they only come out of it with 1 point in the standings rather than the 2 that I feel like they kind of deserved, but at least they played well, and Beniers looked like a little bit more himself, so those are both good signs for hopefully the rest of the season and this stretch of Colorado, then Edmonton, then Colorado, then Edmonton, which looked a lot more like Murderer's Row at the beginning of the season, and now looks like good team with some struggles lately, and bad team, then back and forth like that. With that said, though, I think we can now move on to the Kraken 3 stars. And as always, these are brought to you this season by the patrons of this channel. So if you do want to help decide the Kraken 3 stars after each and every Kraken game in these videos, you can help support this channel a little bit more than you already are by watching this video to this point by helping support financially through Patreon through the link down below. With that, the first star in this game for me has to be Eeli Tolvanen. He had a fantastic game. I might go a little bit unnoticed, but a goal and an assist. But even outside of those 2 points, which obviously make a pretty big difference, he was really noticeable for the Kraken in all aspects of this game. Full 200-foot game from him, defense, neutral zone, offensive end. He was all over the place. We've seen especially the defense, I would say, so far this season, and a couple of games where the offensive side of Tolvanen that we expect to see maybe a little bit more of show up. So it's good to see him kind of put those 2 of those together in this one. Then for my second star in this game is maybe the only guy, but certainly one of a small number that I would pick over Tolvanen for the current Kraken MVP to this point in the season. He would be the top of my list right now. It's Jaden Schwartz. Another fantastic game from Schwartz, especially noticeable in the offensive end. He obviously has that power play goal, but the net front presence from him and the constant ability to really have a big difference on the forecheck has been especially noticeable this season. I mean, he's always been, at least when healthy for the Kraken, a very solid player. He was one of the better players in the postseason for the Kraken last year, but kind of always seemed to fly a bit under the radar, even if he was a pretty steady force for them in the first 2 seasons. So far this season, though, he does not fly under the radar at all. He's been, I would say, the best Kraken player to this point and was good again in this game. Then for the third star, I mean, I really wanted to give Daccord one of the stars in this game, but it was kind of just a mediocre game for Daccord. He did have a couple of nice saves, but had the one that I think he probably could have had a save on that does end up going in on that Michelli shot. Either way, I think that Beniers did earn the third star in this game. Again, started to look a little bit more like the Beniers we know with the setting up plays, great through transition, and even if he had a couple go off of his stick and isn't fully back there, the board play still isn't quite back to what we saw last season, something that's kind of fallen apart here in the last few games. He was at least able to create offensively. He does get the 2 assists in this game and also had a couple of potentially game-ending shots on goal, a breakaway at the end of the third, and then a wide open shot from the low face-off circle in overtime. Both of those Ingram is able to make the save on because Beniers is just not able to have any manner of luck whatsoever, even when he is playing well. Eventually it'll come for him, though. It was at least, again, good to have him once again be noticeable for the Kraken, which kind of hasn't been true over the last few games. But with that said, as always, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars of this game would have been, and just general thoughts about what was a frustrating end in just 1 point in the standings, but otherwise a pretty well played game by the Kraken, and one that if they continue to play this way, results will start to come. Anyway, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel for free. And if you'd like to support a little bit more than that, there's also the link to Patreon down below as well. And until next time against Colorado, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken!